Good evening. I'd like to call the July 5th, 2016 Davie County Commissioners meeting to order. This time, if you would join me in the invocation. Dear God, as we come before you this evening, as always, we are grateful for the opportunity for self-governance in the United States and in Davie County. We're thankful that we have been able to celebrate 240 years of freedom, and we recognize that freedom is not free, and we're continually reminded of that on a daily basis. As we come before you this evening, we ask for your wisdom and guidance as we make the best decisions we can for all concerned in Davie County. In your name, amen. We stand, and Mr. Poindexter, if you lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. As you can see, Mr. Ruffin is not with us this evening. He is under the weather, so our thoughts are with him. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. 5-0. Next item is public comment. Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Chairman, no one signed up for public comment tonight.
Okay. All right. Next item is public hearing. And Mr. Meadwell, are you going to?
That's Brian's.
Oh. I'm one behind. Okay. Yeah. Mr. Myers, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I just want to take a moment to clarify how the Schedule of Values was developed. The Schedule of Values was presented to the Commissioners on June 6, 2016, and it was developed using market data within Davie County. This data was compared to Marshall and Swift, a national appraisal guide, and other bordering counties data that is also working on the 2017 reevaluation. There's been several calls in the tax office since the last meeting on how the schedule was created, and so I just wanted to clarify that to the board that that's how the schedule was created. It was using data within Davie County compared to other data. So the assessor shall submit, this is North Carolina General Statute 105-317 C 1 through 2 A and B. The assessor shall submit the proposed schedule, standards, and rules to the Board of County Commissioners not less than 21 days before the meeting, in which they will be considered by the board. On the same day they are submitted to the board for its consideration, the assessor shall file a copy of the proposed schedule, standards, and rules in his office, where they shall remain available for public inspection. Upon the receipt of the proposed schedule, standards, and rules, the Board of County Commissioners shall publish a statement in the newspaper having general circulation in the county stating that the proposed schedule, standards, and rules to be used in appraising real property in the county have been submitted to the Board of County Commissioners and are available for public inspection in the assessor's office, and the time and place of the public hearing on the proposed schedule, standards, and rules that shall be held by the Board of Commissioners at least 7 days before adopting the final schedule, standards, and rules. This statement was published in the public notice section of the newspaper June 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th. Mr. Chairman, at this time, the board will need to hold a public hearing for the schedule of values for real property and a separate public hearing for the schedule of values for present use.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Myers. All right. We will, at this point, go into a public hearing. Mr. Vogler.
Now is time for the commissioners open the public hearing for the comments, for purposes of comments on the following. At this time, the proposed schedule, standards, and rules for the 2017 reevaluation of real property. I'd ask anyone who wishes to come to comment on this public hearing, come forward to the podium, state your full name to the board, and then comment on the proposal. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, seeing none, come forward to comment. I would turn the public hearing back over to you as chair to close the public comment section of this public hearing, provide the board an opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
All right. Thank you. Declare the public hearing closed. Does anybody have any questions for for Brian, Mr. Myers. This policy is consistent with how we adopted the schedule in the past.
Yes, sir.
Nothing's changed with the statute, right?
That is correct, sir.
Can I have a second public hearing?
That's it.
We'll have to have a second public hearing also. President.
Okay. Any questions? Entertain a motion to approve the valuation, the 2017 revaluation standards. Motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Not all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that passes 5-0. All right, now we need the second public hearing for the present use values.
Now it's time for the commissioners to open a public hearing for comments on the following proposed schedule, standard and rules for the 2017 reevaluation of present uses. I would ask anyone who wishes to comment at this public hearing, come forward to the podium, state your full name for the board, and then comment on the proposal. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, seeing no one come forward to comment, I would turn the public hearing back over to you as chairman of the board, closing the public comment section of this public hearing, provide the board the opportunity to discuss among yourselves what, if any, action you wish to take with regards to this matter.
Okay. Any questions or comments about the present use valuation for 2017? All right. Declare the public hearing closed. Entertain a motion to approve the 2017 revaluation present use standards as presented.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Motion to have a second.
Second.
Second. Further discussion? Not all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Mr. Chairman, according to North Carolina General Statute, that before adopting the schedule, that after we hold the public hearing, there must be 7 days before adopting the schedule. The adoption of the schedule, staff's recommendation will be August 1st, 2016. And then after the schedule is adopted, the tax office will publish an ad in the newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks, advertising that the schedule has been adopted.
Okay. All right. So that will be on our agenda in
That'll be on-
August.
Yes, sir.
That's right.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have a presentation from Kimley Horn. Or Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. If the board recalls, we started a process probably 9 months ago in looking at a feasibility study for a new interchange on Interstate 40. The county, working with the Winsome MPO and helping and assisting in funding this, hired Kimley Horn to assist us with this feasibility study. And before you tonight is an update to this plan. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jonathan Guy with Kimley Horn to go over his presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you again for your time tonight. I understand I've got about 15 minutes to cover what we've been doing over the past 9 months, and so I'm going to roll through a couple slides of the work we've been doing. These have been shared at our technical stakeholder meetings. And this meeting is not to present the final recommendations, it's merely to provide you guys with an update on what we've been doing, cover any sort of questions you might have, and sort of set direction for the next tasks that we've got outlined to complete. Up before you is the project study area. You can see that we're looking at not only the I-40 corridor, but we're also studying 158 as it parallels through this area, the 801 corridor, essentially down to Cornancer Road, but through Bermuda Run, and then of course 2 parallel routes coming off of that, both Redland Road and Baltimore Road. Baltimore Road being the facility that's providing access to Ashley Furniture at this time. Study area, you can see a number of intersections and traffic count locations where we've collected data. This data is what we're using to facilitate the analysis of alternatives, whether it's at the intersection of 158 and 801 or the intersection of Baltimore Road and 158. Two intersections that are not showing up on this map that have been added that we've started looking at, as well as the intersections, or actually three, of 158 at Farmington Road and then both ramp interchanges at Farmington Road. Those were added after we had already sort of started the process, and that was at the request of NCDOT to include those because of the high school going in up there. So we've looked at those interchange ramps and we have some preliminary recommendations for that as well. Environmental constraints, the beginnings for a new interchange, one of the things we have to look at is the impacts to not only cultural resources but natural resources, those including streams, ponds, wetlands in this case. There's, in the area that we're talking about, potentially recommending an interchange, there's not a lot of environmental constraints. One of the other things we do look at is the impact to neighborhoods in the area, and this is off of your GIS website. You can see the neighborhoods in and around the area that we'll be looking at, specifically as it relates to the interchange that's from 801 back to the Redland Road interchange. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail here in just a second. Average daily traffic volumes, in addition to the data that we collected on those major corridors, we also pulled NCDOT's data together that had been captured over the past couple years. In some locations, we saw significant increases in traffic volumes from 2013 to 2015. 2013 was the last time that DOT had collected some information out here. In other locations, we observed that traffic volumes in general were maintaining the same. Another component to the feasibility study is the evaluation of crashes in the corridor. This is for I-40 from Farmington Road to NC 801, so the two, if you will, adjacent interchanges to the potential interchange. What you can see out there is there was a lot of fixed object collisions out there, animal, some side swipes. But for the 5 years of data that we pulled, this is actually a pretty low number of collisions for a corridor, so nothing alarming at this location. It's always interesting, though, and we've got these for some of the other major corridors, to see what types of crashes are occurring, because they are predictive in the behavior of the corridor and the need for some improvements. For instance, if you look at NC 801 all the way from Redland Road, so back on the north side of 40 coming all the way down through Bermuda Run, through Cornatzer Road, you can see that the predominant crash type through this area is 72, which is rear ends. So there were 72 recorded. While not a very high number, especially over a 5-year period, what that tells us, though, is that it's inducive or indicative of congestion in the area. The majority of these were concentrated around the intersection of 801 and 158. If you drive the corridor, that's a pretty obvious statement. You know that there's heavy congestion there. If you look at some of the other crash types that are prevalent there, left turns as well as others incorporate. There's a few side swipes incorporated into that. It's people pulling out in front of each other. It's more rear ends and just in a different category than that. And so you can see that the majority of this is associated with congestion. Same thing for 158 from Farmington to the river. You can see, again, rear ends. What was surprising through this area was that the number of animal accidents that were occurring through this corridor. Usually we see most of those occurring on the interstates. I guess with the parallel nature of 158 to I-40 through here, you have the animals coming through and then coming across, and they're unfortunately being hit. But that was actually the second highest crash type in the corridor. Now, as Andrew said, our primary task is to look at the feasibility of a potential interchange on I-40 in between Farmington Road and 801. Federal Highway Administration provides us guidance on how we need to evaluate new interchanges. And there's 8 criteria that need to be met. And you can see those up there on the board. And the very first one is the need for access can't be met by the existing interstate interchanges. This one is pretty obvious to meet. If you look at the spacing in between Farmington Road, and we're going to pull that up in a little bit, and 801, you've got a vast amount of space in between those two interchanges. So you have a heavy concentration at either one, depending on which direction you're coming from. Reasonable system management techniques Unfortunately, those techniques, whether it's HOT lanes, hot lanes as we like to call it, HOV, or carpooling, mass transit, they're not currently available in the corridor, nor if they were implemented would that have an impact to what we're talking about. The rest of these are all related and built upon it, and so the feasibility study we'll be pulling together will be outlining each of these in detail and looking at how the proposed interchange will relate to both of these. So one of the first things we look at, and I spoke about this earlier, you can see the distance in between the 801 interchange, which is the interchange back over here where you see number 1, and then Farmington Road, which is way over here at exit 174. You can see a distance there of about 6 miles, 6.3 if you measure it, 6 by the interstate signing. And you can see there's a feasible area that we've determined makes the most sense. Spacing criteria from FHWA states that you need at least 1 mile in between interchanges, and that's not measured from the ramps, it's actually measured from the cross street. So in this case, it would be measured from where 801 crosses. 1 mile out is a feasible location for an interchange. You've got Redland Road, which comes in at about 2 miles as it crosses over, and then just on the other side of Redland Road, you actually have the rest area for this location. So you've got ramps coming in and coming out. While not a true interchange there, it does have ramps, and so it acts a lot like an interchange. So that really narrowed down where we could put it. It also restricted the ability to put it at Redland Road, not just because of the rest area, but also because of Bethlehem United Methodist Church being there. It's a historic property, and there's a number of homes in and around Redland Road that while an interchange could be constructed there, I will go ahead and tell you from an environmental standpoint through the NEPA document, it would be very difficult to get approved. It would be also very expensive to build an interchange there for the number of relocations and impacts to the church you would have to overcome. So we determined that the feasible location was in the area that's outlined there. You can see Redland Road over here. Just to orient you, this is 158 coming through here. Redland Road is on the end of the western border. And then this is Baltimore Road. And as we looked at this and we determined if one of the guiding principles of this is to remove truck traffic off of both Farmington Road and 801, the best way to accomplish that is to connect Baltimore Road to I-40. Pull the trucks out of there. That takes trucks off of 158. It allows them to directly access I-40, which is where they're ultimately trying to go. And that's where they're coming from. So let's take out the primary highway routes and secondary routes that unfortunately they're having to use today to access the facility and connect Baltimore Road. Baltimore Road extension, as it's been called in some of our maps, makes a lot of logical sense because we are traversing across primarily agricultural and forested land. There is Redland Way, which is a neighborhood here that you can see. It's connected with Bethlehem Drive and comes up through here. We are doing our best to actually skirt around some of the topography to come across. You'll see in some of the other graphics coming up to minimize the impact to that neighborhood. So as we looked at this, there was a couple different options we considered. One, we could connect Baltimore Road to Redland Road, as you can see up here. And the other one was taking it all the way up to 801. And as you start to look at the network and you start to look at the need for mobility, at least on the north side of 40, given the connectivity, as well as the combination of mixing truck traffic, heavy amounts of truck traffic, it didn't make sense for us to push that connection to either Redland or 801. It also dramatically increased the cost to carry it up there as well. So we came up with a couple different options, and you can see here some feasible options included, and this is actually inverted. So north would be to the bottom of the page there. And you can see Redland Way. This is Redland Way, neighborhood coming in right here. So Baltimore Road would be to the top of the page, would be coming in through here. And this would be a standard diamond interchange with a clover leaf in place. Some of the other interchanges that made more sense as we reorient you here, Longwood Drive. So this is the Redland Way neighborhood, and then here's I-40 through here, is to bring Baltimore Road up and then to have it come across and loop back on if you're heading back to the west, or come straight up and go back to the east with the simple ramp. Same thing as you come across, you basically come in and come off of the interstate in those patterns. We even elongated that out a little bit, furthering that separation away from the neighborhood and pulling it more over in this direction. There's actually where my cursor is, there's actually a knoll here, and so we've sort of skirted around the backside of that to help reduce some of the noise and some of the impacts, as well as to take advantage of that topography as we're building this and constructing it. Here's what it looks like when you actually clean it up a little bit. You put it in a CAD, and you can understand what the cut fill limits are, or the amount of fill that's going to be needed. You can see some of the green areas there. This is what it's going to take to sort of build that. You can see as we're coming around that knoll how it starts to taper in really quickly. This road is designed to be a two-lane road connecting over to Baltimore Road. So we're not talking about a major interstate facility here. This is not a spur route. This is not, 740 or something like that connecting to Baltimore Road. It's intended to be a primary route, so not a secondary route, but a primary route connecting Baltimore Road and 158 up to the interstate. There would be a control of access because it is an interstate connection facility that would come back from this ramp 1,000 feet. That basically restricts your access to that roadway for 1,000 feet. It does leave you with the ability to have another connection in between where the interchange is and 158. There's enough space through there. But this maximizes and also minimizes the necessary right-of-way as well as the cost associated with this, but provides the most fluid mobility in that cars don't have to stop as they come off or come onto the interstate. It's not a typical diamond interchange like you have at Farmington Road or at 801. This is designed to keep the traffic moving. There was some concerns associated when we met with Ashley Furniture about the ability for trucks to make some of the turns that we're showing on these. I will let you know that the radiuses for the loop ramps here, these are much larger than what you've probably experienced if you've driven I-40 through Winston-Salem, specifically at 52. We're not talking about ramps of that size. We're talking about ramps in the 300 to 400 as far as your radius. So very flat curves, but wide. The idea here is, again, to keep trucks moving, vehicles moving. This is not just a truck interchange, but it is designed primarily for trucks, or at least with trucks in mind, more so than most interchanges. This is just another option. You can sort of see, not an option, but you can sort of see how this ties in and comes all the way back down to where 158 is. You can see the road as it's coming up. Again, as we were talking about that control of access, about where you see this note here coming off here, that's about where your control of access would end. So you do have access to the property. It's not a facility that is just going to cut up a piece of property and it's going to be unusable. You will still have access to the adjacent properties there as well. There was a lot of interest about 158 and Baltimore Road, and what I will tell you is we've looked at two different options. The most simplest is to just come in here and to put a signal. Based on our observations and conversations with some of the stakeholders, we are seeing vehicles sit at this intersection today and have to wait several minutes to try to make a maneuver. Then they're taking unacceptable gaps and they're pulling out in front of other cars. So it will not be long before you start to see a rise in collisions at this location. The other option we've looked at is a roundabout. We know that there is some existing work going on here at the church, and one of the concerns that has been raised to us is the size of the roundabout. Is it large enough for trucks? As with the interchange, it's designed at a much larger radius than what we typically would see for a two-lane or a single-lane roundabout, two-lane road adaptive, which is about 110 feet in diameter. You're looking at 180 feet, which is large enough for a multi-lane roundabout at this location. Again, the idea to accommodate larger vehicles, to accommodate circulation, to make it easier for vehicles. Some of the benefits of this versus the traffic signal, growing up in the area, I know that we lost our power quite a bit when we have an ice storm. They're very frequent in this location. When you got a traffic signal, what's the first thing you got to do? You got to post an officer at that location to control traffic because there was a signal there. Roundabouts, you don't have to do that. They can maintain themselves when there are power outages. And the maintenance cost overall, while there's a higher initial cost to put in, maintenance costs long-term are actually much cheaper. One of the other intersections, just sort of stepping away from the interchange, we did look at a couple other locations. The big one being 801 and 158. We got a lot of input about what's going on here. We coupled that with our field observations. And we came up with two different options. The first one is just really adding in some laneage to the existing facility up here, or to the existing intersection, allowing the creation of two additional lanes coming northbound in the morning, dealing with this odd right turn lane that's up here today. There's some issues with folks using the right as a through. It's confusing for motorists. It's confusing for people who are turning right through here. Again, trying to maximize storage, adding in dual lefts if you're coming in from the 158 side so that you can turn onto 801 to head to I-40. The other one that's gained some traction, or that people like, and this is just a conceptual rendering of it, is a roundabout at this location. You will notice that there is a building underneath the roundabout, that is the Wells Fargo. To put in a multi-lane roundabout, again, this is a pretty big diameter roundabout. If you're familiar with the roundabout that's at Old Salem, this is of the same size. It actually works pretty well. It's designed to control speeds and to move traffic in an efficient manner. Here's what it looks like when you clean it up a little bit and you actually put it into CAD. One of the things that some of the feedback that we've gotten from DOT and from our technical stakeholders and folks in the community is that if you'll follow my cursor as you're coming around the roundabout coming from I-40 and you're wanting to head south on 801, is to actually carry 2 through lanes further down and drop that at a convenient point where it makes sense. Good suggestion, and we're going to update this drawing to actually reflect that as an alternative for implementation as well. Another area of interest is I-40 at Farmington Road. With the school going on, being constructed out there, I should say the second, got the middle school, and then you're going to put in the new high school out there. And then you also have the Vulcan Quarry out there, the combination of traffic just associated with the schools, because schools generate a lot of traffic. Then you have the trucks associated with the Vulcan Quarry, and then the school buses. The existing intersection ramps out here being unsignalized are going to reach a point of oversaturation very, very quickly. The interesting thing about our recommendation here is we started doing some due diligence. We actually spoke to the division bridge engineer. He indicated that the bridge is of structural sufficiency to a point that it doesn't need to be replaced, which is always good to hear. It seems like every day we hear of bridges that are in poor condition. This one's actually in pretty good shape for a DOT bridge, which also means that there's no plans to widen this section of 40 through here. Given that it's an older interchange, the ability to come in and drop in turn lanes, whether it's a left turn onto eastbound 40 or a left turn onto westbound 40, you're left with a very small amount of space to try to do that, to the point where it's not worth spending your money to try to drop in turn lanes because they're only going to hold about 2 cars before you taper that back out. It does look like we love roundabouts, and we do like roundabouts, but the point is they actually work in very rural places such as the Farmington Road interchange here, where you need to put in capacity and you need to do it in a manner that you don't have to widen the roadway. Now, one of the things that DOT asked us to look at was from the north side of the interchange up past the school, was to look at what it would take to widen that out to a 3-lane section. As they start to see more growth in the area, that's one of the projects that they've looked at. Ironically enough, when DOT was programming their projects for funding moving forward, they had already identified the interchange here prior to us knowing that, as well as the 158 intersection, which you can see here, all 3 for roundabouts. This division actually is one of the first divisions to implement what's known as a dog bone or a dumbbell interchange. They actually did it in Louisville. It's operated for many, many years, so if you're familiar with that, you'll know how this will operate. The only difference is this one will open, if it is built this way, it would open up with lighting, as that's a new standard for DOT. Carrying that all the way out, just to sort of give you perspective, you can kind of see, here's the existing school up here. The proposed school is going to come in this location over in here. What we've carried up the Farmington Road, you can see this is a widening, 3 lanes all the way up. Based on the information we have now, we have not surveyed this. That was not a part of our task, but based on the GIS information we were able to gather from the state as well as the county, there appears to be sufficient right-of-way through this area to widen this road out as you need to. It doesn't mean that you're widening just to one side. You're probably going to widen on both sides through there, what's known as a symmetrical widening to accommodate that. But that level of capacity, being able to handle, whether it's for football games, or special events, or just having 2 schools on the road, I will go ahead and tell you you're going to need some additional improvements here as well as at the interchange. As I drove this afternoon, it is a long way to take Farmington Road all the way up to 801 to try to work your way back around. So if I'm a parent and I drop my kids off at school, I'm going to come back down to this interchange. I'm not going to be headed to the north necessarily to try to work my way around. So just know that is how traffic is probably going to access the site. One of the things that the town of Bermuda Run had asked us to do was to look at pedestrian connectivity. If you've been out to the medical center over here, you notice that there are a lot of folks who use the medical center to walk. They've got a great greenway system that's starting to come in along the frontage here. And one of the big hurdles or barriers, if you will, is how do you get across from this area and Kenderton up here to the north? How do we get back across to the town center that's being created over here? So we took a look at it. Some of the bigger things that started to jump out at us is, it was the natural inclination was to just carry it across this side of the interchange, the same side as Davie Medical. But when we started looking at that, you can count 3 locations where you would have pedestrians crossing either, as it is today, a single lane, or in the future it could be potentially multi-lane, uncontrolled movements, which is one thing you don't want to do. So we actually recommended that it be across the north side, or at least on the northern side of 801 as you come across, and then tie into the facility over here, using the signalized intersection as the crossing point, and then connectivity heading back up towards Kenderton. Signals are always the safest place to cross for pedestrians. And this just shows you a little bit more detail how that might be accomplished via a sidewalk. My last slide. So what's next? Well, we've gone through our preliminary recommendations. We're at a point now where we've been interacting with the technical steering committee, who's been advising us on the local issues, as well as giving us feedback on some of our recommendations. So we're going to begin the documentation process. We've wrapped up our stakeholder interviews. We've sat down with two groups. We still have to catch up with Davie County Schools. We'd like to talk with them at least one more time, or at least one time. But we've met with Davie Medical, and then I met with Ashley Furniture today to understand what they're up to and how this might affect them. So we will begin drafting our recommendations, as you can see in the feasibility study. We're going to have the technical steering committee review that. Then it will come back before this board, of course, with county staff reviewing that prior to that. So I'll be back to present again, and then there'll be coordination with both NCDOT and the MPO as we move this forward. The ultimate goal is, with any transportation project, is to find funding sources to build this. A couple things going for this, especially for the interchange. Some of the intersection projects, those are a little more difficult, just given their impact, especially with the new interchange. The new interchange, given the potential end user and the development that it's benefiting, there are other funding sources other than just NCDOT for that. Department of Revenue, there's other funding sources beyond. You can actually look at U.S. Department of Agriculture for that as well. So there are a lot of different funding sources. We'll document that in our study. And with that, I will close and be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for that. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Guy?
I just have a comment. I'd like to say I think a whole lot of planning has gone into this. I think you've done a great job, and look forward to working with you on implementing some of it.
Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
One, the speed on the ramps, those ramps, they look a little bit tight with those trucks. What would the speed limit be on those? How could?
Sure, that's a great question. They would be signed and posted just like any of the other interchanges out there, which typically you're exiting off the interstate, the posted speeds are going to be, or the advisory speeds are going to be 45 to 35 miles per hour through there. So again, as we're stepping off the interstate, one thing we want to do is we don't want a 70 mile per hour truck coming through there. We want to step it down gradually as it comes into interface with 158 and then Baltimore Road. So it would be in the 35 to 45 mile per hour range as it's slowing down through there.
Okay, and the other question I have is that the 158 roundabout up at Baltimore Road, how about the church? Will we be encroaching on what the church has just built there? Or?
No. it was interesting, as soon as we started this project, that came up out of the ground, the improvements with the church there, which looked great. We wouldn't encroach on that. If anything, that's one of the beauties of a roundabout. It's not like a typical intersection where you've got to maintain the alignment of the roadway. You can actually divert 158. You can actually curve it as you're approaching into the roundabout, which then allows us to shift that if we needed to. Again, that's not the end-all recommendation for there. It's the two different options. You've got a traffic signal. Traffic signal could easily be put up today if you needed to control some of that. Both of those would mitigate or would not impact the church improvements there. They've spent a lot of money, and we want to make sure we stay off of that.
Jonathan, I really appreciate your presentation, and I think clearly something needs to be done to divert trucks in different ways so they can get to the interstate quicker, and it's causing congestion in other parts of the road system too, and the problem you saw at 158 obviously would be alleviated somewhat by having a connector to I-40. And I'm still studying this roundabout thing, okay?
Sure.
I know that there's a love affair with roundabouts.
I don't have one. You look for options.
Yeah, well, the dumbbell, whatever approach on
Sure.
that. But in any event, yeah, we've had some experience with roundabouts previously. We had one some time ago where we have the corridor, the 4-lane corridor up at 801 on I-40. We had a roundabout,
Yep.
and I remember a truck, having a problem and holding up traffic for some period of time when it couldn't make the turn and got jackknifed or whatever
Right.
it did. So that truck sometimes don't go with roundabouts too well, from what just from anecdotal experience.
That's a good observation.
So that's something to take in mind. And the other thing, and I'm not going to say anything about the roundabout at the soccer field because obviously that's in place, but some of that was done because of the congestion from the soccer fields, but that congestion is so isolated. A lot of times you'll have slower traffic, because I go through there every day, than you used to have just with the merging in. And you probably have a safer situation because people have to slow down, but I think a traffic light could have possibly worked just as well there as a roundabout. I'm just saying, it's not, sometimes every time, if you got to hammer everything looks like a nail, and
Sure.
sometimes roundabout seems to be the only solution that we gravitate towards.
It does, and some of it is sometimes you're looking to mitigate other circumstances beyond just moving traffic, and roundabouts afford that. To a certain point, they perform equally, if not better, than a signalized intersection. And then at some point, when you reach what's known as an oversaturated condition, where you've got too much traffic trying to use that, the signal will actually perform longer and better. And so you weigh those out. And so a couple things when we look at this, again, we're making observational recommendations based off traffic analysis and crash data. And so by looking at the intersections, when we isolate that information out, roundabout starts to take out a lot of the crashes that are prevalent there. Some of the left turns and right turns and side swipes, you can remove those. Some of them, some of the side swipes will still remain if you've got a larger one. I think one of the differences in this approach is that in a lot of the locations we're talking about implementing something where we've got the ability to put in what is of the right size. And we're the intent is to design it, because we're obviously not designing it at this location or at this time, is to design it for a larger design vehicle than, say, what happened at 801 in the interchange ramp. That was a response to, we don't have money, we've got to move traffic here, and so we're going to put something in that's probably not going to work long term. Because I remember when it went in, because I was involved with the Kenderton property and studying the traffic with that, so I remember when that happened. This case is slightly different in that we know that we've got to accommodate trucks, and so everything has been oversized because that's the last thing you want. Will it be the final recommendation that DOT approves? I don't know. They may say, you know what, we're better off with turn lanes and improving the intersection and keeping it as a signal. And that might be the right answer. We never like to come in and just give one option. And so that's why there's two different options in there. Just both work. Then it comes down to, comes down to money. Who's going to pay? And then how can we get it funded? And then the implementation is the other side to it too.
And
How
the only
quickly
other
can we do
thing
it?
is at 801-158, you pointed out that right-hand turn lane, I don't know, I'm sure
Yeah.
there was a reason for it, but that's
Yeah.
horribly designed, and I'm sure, if you redesigned that intersection, you'd have some space, and you could probably do
You
it a
would.
lot better.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that we heard when we met with the town. How can we fix this? This doesn't seem to make sense here. How can we increase capacity? Because it backs up for a while. And, what surprised me is you think of, that area is it's going to be very directional in nature, meaning in the morning I've got traffic and it's all going to be headed to the Winston-Salem area, and it's all going to rush back in at 5 o'clock. And what we saw was AM and PM, it's all directions. It's not just two legs, it's all four legs, and it's coming from every single different direction. So balancing the mobility there at the intersection. And as you look at what the town's trying to do there, and they're wanting to accommodate additional modes of traffic, that may sway us back to that intersection side because it's a little more pedestrian friendly. Although I'd say that's a very big intersection regardless of what you do to try to walk as a pedestrian. But there are ways to mitigate that. You do, at least under a signal, you do have controlled movements, so that is a little safer. So a lot of things to weigh out as we go through the final recommendations.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I have a couple questions.
Okay.
On your proposed design for the interchange with Baltimore Road and 40,
Mhm.
and you probably said this and I just missed it, but the design you have where you don't have a true diamond, I guess on the northwest side of the interchange or the westbound merge, is that just for cost or why is
No,
primarily?
you have all movements here from the interstate. There was a intent to not connect, so as I'll sort of demonstrate it here. As I'm coming up, and so Baltimore Road is down here on the end, as I'm coming up here, one of the things we thought about was, does this need to go all the way up to 801, or does this road need to come over to Redland Road to tie in? And as you begin to look at the number of homes that it would impact, and the mobility that it provided long-term, there was a thought from the technical steering committee that, for now, it makes sense to design the interchange as we have it, and there not be a connection to the north. Now, if you ever wanted to put that connection back in, this interchange can easily be modified to do that. The road basically comes off and comes up whatever direction, whether it comes up to the north or comes back over to Redland, and then this ramp gets slightly modified to come into a T intersection. And then you've accommodated that additional mobility to the north. This was sort of it can stay this way long-term, or it can be a phase one, phase two approach to it. But you still have mobility in each direction from I-40 coming on and coming off the interstate. So it's not just you can come in and you got to go back out 801. I can use this in either direction I'm wanting to head.
Second question, on Farmington Road, you had talked about where the school is, you had talked about perhaps making that 3 lanes. Does that take into account the decel lane that is already required there?
No, this would be essentially a 3-lane facility with a center turn lane going down the middle, which would facilitate left turning traffic, whether it's at the school or at other locations through there. You've got a number of homes through this location. You've got the rock quarry through here. There's a couple little streets that kind of come off to some larger lots. You've got a mobile home park back here. This left turn lane, I'll zoom in on a location where you can kind of see it a little bit better. You can see here, it's really just a center turn lane is what that recommendation is. The biggest problem we see in mobility and congestion is people sitting behind somebody trying to make a left turn. And so when you can take that out of the roadway and they have a safe location to make that left, then we can move more traffic through there. And in this case, NCDOT said, it looks to me like a 3-lane section makes the most sense out here. And so that's what we've laid out. And from a traffic volume standpoint, from what we've seen, from the collective data and just knowing what a school will generate, a public school, it's probably the best recommendation to accommodate enhanced mobility out there for vehicles. So you would have that right turn deceleration lane in addition to that left turn lane.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Guy? We appreciate all your work, and we'll look forward to the next presentation. So
Absolutely. Thank you again for your
definitely
time.
needed. No question.
Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Andrew, have you got anything you want to add to that, or? Okay. All right. Next, we'll move to the consent agenda, which is fairly lengthy. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that? If not, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion, to have a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? That passes 5-0. All right, next we will move to the county manager's report, and Ms. West is going to present that.
I have one item to bring forward to you tonight, and that is Paul Moore would like to come and give a brief update on recreation and parks.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I just wanted to give you a briefing on Saturday's Independence Day celebration and fireworks extravaganza. We had a first successful event for Davie County and the Recreation Parks Department. Based upon all of our quad counting, which we did 2 consecutive quad counts, we estimated that we hit our target market of at least 3,000 people. We could have had more. More folks were still streaming in as nighttime approached, but had a very good event, had nothing but positive comments. We will be conducting a post-op event meeting on Friday to kind of look at what we could look to improve, change, make any additions for next year. So it was all around a great event. The fireworks show was spectacular, and we could all hear the cheers and the roars from the crowd, both from Mando Field in front of us and the Davie Family YMCA Athletic Complex behind us. Do want to take this opportunity now and thank the vast amount of staff support and volunteer support for this event. Want to recognize and thank all the members of the event committee, Davie County Chamber of Commerce, of course, the Davie County Recreation and Park staff. We had our new staff aboard, Amanda Dotson and Scott Ludwig. They put in some considerable effort, being it was their second day on the job. They did an extremely job well done. Davie Family YMCA and staff that provided our activities. Davie County employees, I know Mr. Vogler was there, as well as Keith Dye with Technology Solutions, did an incredible job for us. Katie Brewer with Davie County Special Olympics. Davie County Fire Marshal Jerry Myers, thank you so much. Center Volunteer Fire Department and all other Davie County Fire Departments that assisted, whether they were standby or actually helping with parking detail. Davie County EMS, Davie County High School football volunteers, all of the volunteers that were not associated with Davie County High School, Davie County Schools, Davie County's Cub Scout Troop, number 574, that was handing out our American flags for the event. All of our food vendors, Moxville Police Department for handling our security, Moxville Fire Department for standby, and the town of Moxville for allowing us to utilize Mando Field. And last but not least, Hell Artificier Incorporated that did our fireworks extravaganza. They did a spectacular job. Went out there Sunday morning, early Sunday morning for extra trash detail, and they did a fabulous job on cleanup. So thank you for all those that were in support and came out, and I think it was a good first-time event, and hopefully we'll grow from there, bigger and better each year. Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have a question. I was there, and it was a great event. I tell you, the fireworks display was, I think, the best we've had in a long time. It was great.
It's roughly a 19, 20-minute show, so
Yeah.
that was a wonderful. Saw some. For years, I have been in Southport for the North Carolina 4th of July Festival. See the new displays and fireworks discharges. There were two new test runs that were installed in our fireworks show. They located 6 different sites for the state to do test runs on some new products, and 2 of those that I did recognize. One was the star, the round with the star, that was brand new, as well as the new American flag discharge. Looked really good. So.
And it was very family friendly too.
Absolutely.
Opening up the ball field this year, I think we've done that in the past, but last couple of years I know we haven't. That really allowed for kids to get out and play, and everything wasn't just so compressed. People were able to spread out, and that really worked well.
I've often said that the satisfaction that we get as recreation park professionals is seeing those smiling faces and hearing the cheers and of families, and hearing that roar after the end of the show. That made all the difference in the world. You know, we put a lot of hours. The events committee put a lot of hours, a lot of time and effort that it takes to put on one of these big special events, and that made it all worthwhile. All the sweating throughout the day, to getting prepared the day before, and even afterwards, it was well worth it. So, thank you very much. And also, I will have to give kudos to our residents of Davie County. I've seen a lot of special events in my 16 years in the recreation park profession, and by far one of the cleanest special events sites that I have seen, especially post-event coming out there. You know, only filling up a half a trash bag, four trash bags halfway. Normally you would have 10 plus, just absolutely slam full. So kudos to the residents for keeping the park area and event site area clean. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All right. We will move to any old business to come before the board this evening. Any new business? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143, 318, 11A6. Do I have to read the rest of that?
Yeah.
Okay. To consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of employment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual, public officer, or employee, or prospective public officer or employee. Someone like to make that motion?
I would make that motion.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? 5-0. We are in closed session.
Composting sites to the appropriate person who issues the permits for them.
And that's public record. You can send it to whoever you wish.
When they come in to us, to the county, can we forward them on to the proper people who permitted them to begin with?
EPA?
You tell them about
I believe that would be Diener, maybe.
Diener. Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely forward those to, well, you can forward them to whoever you wish, but yes, that's because they're public record, but you could definitely send them to Diener.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate.
And that's, send it to them the same time it's sent to us.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
that's all.
All right. Let's see, motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
All in favor? 5-0. We are adjourned. Thank you.